Yigal, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me down.
Thank you for being here. This is the first podcast I've done live since my father passed away. And I'm just going to jump right into it. We were talking about it in the pre-roll. Your father passed away a year and some months ago.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been a tough journey. It's been a tough journey emotionally. I broke down on Saturday. I've gone through like anger, grief, sadness, a loss of patience. Did you see that when your father passed?
Yeah, my father passed, he was 95 and we just rebuilt our relationship about 5 years earlier. So even though we were connected through our lives, it was the last 5 years that were beautiful. And as luck had it, I got to be with him for his last few days alongside his bed, but it was totally by luck. I was just planning a trip to see him in North Carolina, and I walked in as he was checking out. And but I didn't realize the ramifications emotionally. I was kind of high in the experience of being so connected to such a incredible, beautiful part of life, which is death, which we don't get to be with. But it wasn't until a year later that I really began to mourn him. A year, kind of the date, all of a sudden I, realized he was really gone. And it's been a challenge. So for you, was it a sudden thing when he passed, Yigal?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know, but my father had Parkinson's and dementia. And when that happens, the muscles start deteriorating. He started choking little by little on food, and he went out to eat with his caregiver, choked on some food. And I thank God every day that none of the family members were actually there to witness that traumatic event. And he was in the hospital. And when, because it was COVID, they basically said like, hey, he can either be on life support for the rest of his life, or we'll take him off. And you guys, 2 people can come in to say goodbye, 15 minutes each, and that's it. Talking with a friend who's a nurse, he said, well, what about hospice? So we called the hospital. They said, yes, let's do hospice. But they said, but only one thing. Usually we give you 24 hours to figure it out. You have 2 hours to bring him home. We brought him home. My brother, my sister, myself, we did the hospice. It was the most traumatic thing as well as the most beautiful thing ever.
Yeah.
I got to say goodbye to my father. I got to ask for forgiveness. I got to forgive. It was tough. And it just solidified to me. I'm a 3rd generation pawnbroker, and I learned the good, the bad, and the ugly from my father. And it just solidified how brilliant of a man he was. And I owe so much to him, to just being on this podcast with you.
Yeah.
Being a pawnbroker, being a successful business person, being just a good human being. I owe a lot of that to my father.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, the sudden thing sounds awful, but in that you got to bring him home, again, another gift that doesn't happen. And like you said, devastatingly traumatic and also beautiful. And for me, when I got to be with him, it was in hospice at a hospice house. And he was conscious just for 1 full day with me, and then unconscious for the next 5 days. And my last hug with him was, he gave me this huge hug, and I didn't even realize he was dying. I didn't know what was up. I just walk in the room, and I'm carrying this hat. Like at our store, we sell these animal hats. So this is not a promo for the store, but here's an eagle one.
Awesome.
And they've got Good Fortune branded on the back. And so I come in with a bear hat, which I grabbed out of the store on the way flying down to see him, not knowing why I was taking a bear hat, but a Native American friend of mine told me, well, a bear is the passing creature. So I walk in, and my dad just grabs it, puts it right on his head, like big smile, gives me this huge hug. And then he speaks to me, and I didn't realize it would be his last words. He says to me, so how are you doing? And I don't mean that business, and it's like all our life we talked about business, the business, and if you're in a family business, it permeates the dinner table of the life.
Yes.
And I couldn't answer him because it was, at the time I was like, what's going on? But I've since thought about that, because just what you said, I mean, you're a 3rd generation pawnbroker, and how you're honoring your dad, or how you're honoring him even through the podcast, is very cool, because there's a thing about pawnbrokers, and I'm going to make a huge generalization, but this is what I believe, that however we're either in it and cultivate it and become, or we're drawn in because of who we maybe were to begin with, we're really good communicators. And we have to be, because we're at the counter with people from diverse backgrounds, they could be hopeful because they're buying their wedding ring from us, or they're not hopeful because they just found their husband in bed with their wife, or who knows. I'm getting all the nomenclature wrong, or they've had a traumatic loss, physically or emotionally or financially, and so it brings out this aspect of communication and almost camaraderie, because we kind of strike across the counter to our customers to be supportive. So I'm kind of touched by what you just said about your dad. Like, there's something I'm getting about you, and I don't know you that well either, of course, about how you want to build connections between people.
Yeah.
And that's an awesome ask. In the world today, we all know this is the right time for that kind of profession too, you know.
For sure. And let me ask you this,
Yeah.
you know, Roger, you've been in the pawn industry a long time. You're the business and president of Good Fortune Jewelry and Pawn in New Hampshire. You said something about talking about business. You know, we're Jewish, and we around the Sabbath table. You're right. It was always like, how's the store doing? How's the business doing? And that was our connection. You've been in business for a long time, and you brought up communication. And it sounds like you made a great relationship with your father as he was passing. Was your father part of the business, or would he just kind of like ask about the business? Kind of tell me, let's start off as how Good Fortune started, why you got into the pawn business, and how it's connected to your father.
Yeah. So no, my father was not part of the business ever. And, you know, I got into the pawn business. I was sort of a young guy moving my family from Boston to New Hampshire. I was a firefighter down in the Boston area, and kind of slated to retire. And, you know, somewhere in there, I began to sell real estate and think of other things I could do. And all of a sudden, the real estate market, this is back in the 80s, it kind of went a little haywire, and there was a recession, and all of a sudden interest rates were up. So people weren't shopping for homes as much. And I realized if I wanted to keep doing the same volume of work, I would have to work twice as much. So from 50 hours a week, I would have to go to 90 or 100 hours a week. And I had these two small boys. So I didn't want to see them. I mean, I did want to see them, but I didn't want to be running around. And so one day, literally, I was reading a book. I was starting to decide, well, if I started a business, what would be a good business? And I remember my dad, his father ran a clothing store, and he wanted his son to go into the clothing store. But my dad came home from World War II, and he didn't want to sell clothing. He'd been so shaken up by his experience. He wanted to do something that was what he wanted to do. And he found his way into wanting to design aircraft, or eventually houses. He became an architect and a builder. But in my family, he was the first one in many generations to jump out of the family lineage of, hey, we're all clothing guys. Anyway, so back to me. So when I thought, well, gee, maybe I should start a business, because I remembered with my dad, because he was an architect and a builder, I could find him. I knew what job site he'd be on after school, or I knew where his office was. So I got to see him and be with him. Whereas my kids, you know, they might have known I was a firefighter or selling real estate, but they couldn't really visit me. You know, I'd be in a car driving somebody around, or I'd be in somebody's house trying to help them out or something, you know, whatever, trying to keep them intact. And so somewhere in there, I thought, well, maybe a business would be good. I had no business background per se, but so I literally thought, well, let me do some research and decide and find out what kind of businesses do good in a downturning economy. So I began to research and found out that back in the Great Depression, consignment stores, secondhand stores, and pawnbrokers seemed to get through unscathed. Like, they didn't do great, but they got through the other end. So I thought, great, maybe I'll start a consignment store and sell people's merchandise, and maybe one day I'll start a pawn shop. So that's how the model began. I started this consignment store with my wife to sell furniture and anything anybody brought in. And probably at the end of the first year, it turned into a pawn shop because people began coming in looking for loans. And we were like, hey, well, that's not what we are. And they were like, well, I think you should be that, because this one guy, he was a pro musician. He'd come back from a tour and he'd say, look, I got this guitar. It's worth $15,000. He says, I come back from a tour. I go to Boston. They give me $1,000 or $2,000 for it. You'll save me a 2-hour car ride. Why don't you do this? So again, that's the condensed version of how we started the shop about
Incredible.
29 years ago. Yeah.
Awesome. And for those who are listening, Roger, just because we have 39 countries listening, what's the hold period and the current interest rate in New Hampshire?
So the service fees in the state of New Hampshire are set by the municipalities. Okay. But ours is 15% basically per 30-day period. There's not a hold period, except within some communities, the local law enforcement has imposed a small 2-week or 1-week hold period.
Yeah. Love it. Now, I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I could be totally off on this. But from a lot of the people that I have interviewed, there's a calm about you. And many times pawnbrokers are very stressed out, very overwhelmed, especially what's happening in the world today. Are you usually this calm and collected as you're doing the pawn business?
Well, I haven't been at the store for a few days. First,
okay. So you're detoxing.
We're running the store differently, and you might be a bad judge of character. For all I know, I'm really stressed, and you can't tell. But no, I think I've definitely encountered a lot of stress in my life from things I've done, and I've not mastered being with it. But sitting with you, I'm just going to breathe easy and relax. And that's one of the things I think as pawnbrokers we all try to do at the counter, because we want to put our best self forward, and boy, do we get all sorts of stuff handed and thrown at us, right? Yeah. So I'm glad I'm glad I show up looking relaxed.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Cool.
My mom would like that.
So 29 years, a lot of people listening to this are younger generation pawnbrokers. And obviously the stats are very stacked against small business in the United States. Yeah. Businesses close all the time, and pawnbrokers have a longevity to them. They love what they do it well, and they do it for a long time. What are some things that you can share that have helped your success in running a pawn shop for 29 years and going forward with it, especially after what happened with the pandemic?
Yeah. I'll kind of start backwards with that one, but I'll try to go forwards as much as I can too. So one of the things I think that helped us is I'm privy to be married to a wonderful woman, my wife. Been with her for about 42 years, and her industry that she's in is she's a relationship systems coach. So her business is actually helping teams of people perform better, get along better.
I love that.
But mostly to get along better in the workplace, meaning if you can optimize relationships between people, like they don't have to all love each other, but if there's respect and functionality and huge sort of communication lines and open sort of democratic ways of coming up with decision making, that helps. So our business early on was kind of modeled after some of her work in the world with much bigger companies. So our team is very integrated into the business. They know a lot about it, and they get taken into account for all decisions. And there are some obviously that the boss or the leader might have to make quickly, but so empowering people has been one of the best things. And that's also led us to, now going backwards in the other direction, to create things that are engaging. So besides the normal pawnbroking duties, the way we've chosen to be involved in our community is a little more complex than just making donations to charitable groups. We have a music festival we were part of starting that goes on once a year. Every year we do a block party where we literally pay our city a bunch of money and we close the street in front of our building, but our block, and we have things for kids to do. Plus we invite the city to bring down, an aerial ladder truck, and we have a host of activities. So inside the store, we do that too. We have a little diamond mine. So we keep, and this is a good one for people to play with. We have a sandbox basically put into a big foot locker, and it's full of diamonds, small melee, little, 5-pointers up and down. Sometimes we throw a bigger diamond in. They're diamonds that appreciably don't bring us a lot of money when we would get rid of them anyway, but people come in and pay $1 and scoop for diamonds. And that's a big draw. So we spent a lot of time creating things that are just kind of fun to do, you could say. So that's been another part of our footprint in the community.
I love that. And I want to go back to the first thing, obviously, because that's where my bells and I get all, chills and tingles. You talked about creating culture. Yeah. And you've got the gift of having a wife who is essentially a culture creating expert, right? Somebody who came from maybe corporate and said, hey, you're starting this pawn shop. Let's build it with culture as opposed to just slapping a sign on and throwing loans out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to what I said about the stress and composure, because I think you just said it. When you have a great culture, I think there's less stress because you're building something with a team as opposed to building something all by yourself. I feel that pawnbrokers tend to want to build things on their own as opposed to bringing the team in to make decisions, to be transparent with, is this a good decision or not? And that loads them with a lot of overwhelming stress in itself.
Yeah, and to be relieved of stress as a business owner is key. And I remember in the business early on, me saying to myself, and certainly friends were saying it, like, well, you can't leave that business. How can you trust anybody? Or, watching my cousin where he and his brother would routinely, scrap their gold themselves. And not that they didn't trust the team to do it, but I began to realize, God, I got to let go of some of this stuff. And that has not been easy for me. Again, what helped is we didn't hire my wife because there's a conflict of interest. She's a business owner, but we hired one of her colleagues to come in from somewhere else and run us for a few days through some work. And it was monumental because we definitely, we became more of a we. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. And so now, even for myself, I'm like, okay, so navigating the pandemic, like, how do I not be there as much? I got the virus early on back in March, okay, and I came back from a trip out of the country, and I was like, hey, I think I can't go to work to be safe, and talked to my team about closing the store, because this was at a time where in New Hampshire they were getting ready to maybe close restaurants. But on a Saturday, we can have 50 or 60 people in our store. We're kind of a big store, and we thought, God, we'll be spreading it too. So in navigating that, it was really a team effort, because I didn't want to deny anybody their livelihood. Two of my senior staff live at home with their very senior parents. So we had to really kind of talk through a lot. And one of the great things that's happened for us is we've got some young folks involved in our company now. And I never thought we would. I really didn't think, how do we transition, or how do we, maybe become employee owned one day, literally find a way to become a model that can work for 100 years or more without my kids having to get into the business. Okay. I think that's been because we've allowed people to really be themselves in many ways.
I love that. And you said we, and I think that the fact that you guys built the we before the pandemic helped you run the store through the pandemic and today even better. And I love the way that you think. And for those of you listening who don't think in that model, it's more important than ever to have the we as a team model, as opposed to just the pawnbroker wearing 15 hats. I love that, Roger. I just, I went to your Google page. You have a beautiful store. I mean, it looks like it's just immaculate, clean, very, very nice. Was it always like that? Or did something happen early on where you said, like, I've got to revamp the location, make it look nice and make it look welcoming?
Well, in the past several years, we've been influenced by a couple of our staff members who are theater people. And they brought to the table the element of, and we all know this, like, if all three of your printers are broken and the main computer, whatever is broken, we have this habit of being pretty transparent with our customers. One of my team members would say, I'm sorry, man, we can't print this for you here, but I can go off the floor and print it. And then say, Judy, but is the back printer broken, or did we get ink? So we would go through all this. And so these younger folks brought in this whole thing of, like, keep up your transparency, be honest like you are, but just smile and pretend you're on a stage. So we kind of have these signs when you come off our back rooms into the main room, put on your smile, you're going on stage. And it's not really acting, but I think in there we've reminded ourselves to keep doing that. And we also we've had a history, and I probably set this historically, of talking to people for a long time, gabbing it up. And of course, that's a way to build a connection. We all do it. But, I found out at some point, it was pointed out to me, hey, Roger, complete the transaction and then gab it up, because the customer might have to get the heck out of here and they don't want to hear your story or hear how you started the company or whatever. So again, receiving guidance from me has been good. It did not happen easily. So the store used to be much messier looking. I thought I had to take care of every light bulb that was out. It wasn't that I didn't trust anybody, but it was just a habit I built up. So yeah, I can go on and on, but that's kind of the gist of that.
I love it, right? Because I mean, that culture of I'm listening to the younger folk, like you said, like listening to the people who are working with you, as long as it's benefiting the business, has helped you grow the business and still continue today. So let's talk about this. The pandemic hit. Obviously, everyone's loan balances, came down and sales went through the roof. What does it look like for your store moving forward in 2021? Are you going to do something different? Are there things that the culture is bringing to the table that they want to say, like, hey, let's do this differently so it can bring more clients in?
Yeah. So again, we're a small shop. We run with, we have a staff of about 12 to 15 people. Only half of them are full-time. The other half are part-time. But so when we closed the store, we could have stayed open. We made a group decision, which was, yes, we're essential, but we knew all we were going to do the first month we stayed open was sell gold and TVs and things, which is not a bad thing to do. We knew people would get the stimulus check, but a couple of my team made a case for, hey, let's mitigate the spread in our little town by kind of setting an example. And after us, other stores closed. But we also kind of jumped ahead to, well, what's going to happen? Because we kind of saw that our loan balances were going to drop. how do we rebuild that up? How do we reach back out? So the first thing we did is we went back to our online presence. So in our shutdown days, the team really focused on that. And again, a lot of the younger people, they took the lead. They were like, okay, the website really performs well, but we don't sell a lot of Native American jewelry off it. And we've got tons of that over many years. Why don't we just open up an Etsy site that is just Native American jewelry and see if we can create just traffic to that. So a couple of the younger folk really, led us towards that. We haven't rebuilt our website in the 10 years since we put it up or so, but it functions really well. It's a vital part of what we do. And so that's some of our future. In other words, knowing that retailing for us always works better than wholesaling. If we buy a 1-carat diamond ring for $2,000 and I can wholesale it tomorrow for 25 or 3,000, great. But if I can retail it for 5 or 6,000 on the website within a week or 2 months, that's even better.
Yeah.
So we're pulling back towards that, even though we're still functioning as a store, but we are becoming more efficient. And without getting too much into it, when we reopen by appointment, and then we turn to kind of a lock buzz situation. So we would only have X number of people in the shop at once. But we're now going back to by appointment only, for a number of reasons. In our town, it finally got here about a month ago, and it's kind of rampant in our little town. Nursing homes that never had it have dozens of fatalities already. So, but in this model, one of the things we did is we scoped out more of people's visit before. So with the people that were coming to shop with us, we were more engaged before their visit. Whereas in the old days, we'd always want them just to come in, to make contact, to see their item. But now we're helping them when we absolutely know it's something that we don't want, or, so we're doing more sort of behind the scenes interaction and communication. And that's been really fascinating for us. It was very cumbersome at the beginning, but now it seems to be working.
Love it. So you said something, you said efficiency, right? I think that a lot of pawnbrokers learned that they have to be way more efficient. I think you guys took it to the next level with like, how can we become efficient, safe for the community, and also still do business where, the team is happy and feels safe doing it this way.
Yeah. And two, as you guys know, it's an important aspect of our companies to have somebody come in and browse and tire kick and look and become familiar and hear about how the loans work and, how our jewelry is priced close to wholesale, et cetera, et cetera. But in the process of engaging those people via a pre-communication, lots of them are dedicated buyers or loan customers already, whether they've been with us or not, meaning in that interaction of a phone call, a text, and an email conversation, they come in and a sale is closed easily. So it makes our team feel even more like, hey, we're doing better. Now our numbers are not what they used to be, but our efficiency is much greater than it's been. And I want to just share this, Igal, because we built the store with a consignment furniture model, which we got rid of the furniture probably year 5 or 6 because jewelry became our thing. We do a lot of consignment jewelry. So that's something that I always like to share with fellow pawnbrokers. And the way it serves us is when somebody comes in to sell us something, we can't always give them what they're looking for. However, we can usually, a very high percentage of the time, take it on consignment, sell it for more, give them a higher percentage after the fact of the sale. And that's a very vital part of our company. It means we've acquired inventory, not just locally, but from around the country. And when it happens from out of the area, it still blows our mind. Like this is probably 8 years ago or 9 years ago, a gal in Beverly Hills sent us a black diamond tennis bracelet.
Wow.
She knew us because of a friend who knew us. So it wasn't like a cold call to her, or she just found our website, but she knew we were reliable. She knew what our model was about. And basically what had happened to her, this was a really, wish I had a picture, but it was a very serpentine looking bracelet where the black diamonds were set kind of invisibly, tightly in. So it was like snake, very flexible. And as we all know, black diamonds are wonderful and not wonderful if you've got to sell them and whatever. And they were small ones, very teeny ones. And the story, so we did our research. She calls us up. We say, yeah, this is what people do around the country. You mail it into us. We'll give you a buy price, a consignment price. We'll photograph it. We'll do basically an appraisal, no charge. And if you want it to sell here on consignment or you want the cash, we'll get that back to you. If you don't want it, we're going to mail it back to you. So we have a model that might look a little cumbersome on the outside, but we're now starting to build this more nationally. So basically she sends us the bracelet and she tells us her story, which was her boyfriend bought it in this little shop in Beverly Hills for about $10,000. She took it to pawn shops out there, and they were offering her routinely about $1,000 to $1,500, which made sense for the weight of the gold and the diamond wholesale value. So she wanted to know what we could do. So our first bit of research informed us that there was only one other shop in the country that sold this bracelet down in Dallas, Texas. It was a designer from Italy, not a well-known guy, but he was a designer. At the shop in Texas, they were retailing them for $6,000 to $8,000, same exact bracelet. So we did our workup, and we thought, hey, we can sell this between $4,000 to $4,500 either on our website or locally. So we ended up selling it for her locally to somebody who paid $4,500, and we were able to give her, like almost like $3,000. So we made $1,500, but she made double. But she waited a year too, of course. So the reason I'm just suggesting it is it's a good model when you're faced with a customer who maybe doesn't want to leave it, but if you're willing to try consignment on a limited way, especially on high-end items, it's really worth it.
And especially now that a lot of pawnbrokers are saying that they can't get inventory, right? Because you can do consignment on jewelry, guitars, a multitude of items.
Yeah.
And if you don't have inventory, then this might be an incredible way to get inventory to sell in your shop. You make a smaller percentage, but you have inventory to sell.
Yep. And what I would do is I put out not a warning to pawnbrokers who want to try this, but just a heads up, because it's like when you're listing a house to sell for somebody as a realtor, you enter into a fiduciary relationship. So when we buy a ring from somebody, we give them the money and we're done. We can sell it or do whatever. But when you're consigning it, they still own it, kind of like a pawn. So we're still used to that. But you're going to be in a financial relationship with them, and you're going to have to communicate with them. And we've done that well, and we've done that not well over the years. So it's just a little heads up. If you go into that, it's a different relationship with the customer.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But a very valuable one because it builds trust in a whole other way.
Love that. Love it. And I think that people get to see stuff that you usually wouldn't have in your shop, and you get to feel your showcases. I love it. Roger, this has been incredible. It's been an honor meeting you. One more thing I want to ask you, what would you like to say, you've got a voice now, we've got thousands of people downloading this, to the pawn industry, to move forward in 2021? Yep.
A few things. I mean, one is the industry obviously has gone through a bunch, and so is everyone else. So we are going to come out of this. And I believe best practices that we all evolve now are going to be really kind of demonstrative in showing off who we are to the community. So it's a really good time to be networked into your community in a different way. And I say different meaning, I don't know what that is for each pawnbroker, but it's a good time to try new things, because we're still going to be explaining to people what a pawn is, as opposed to they think they sold it to us. There's so much education in our field. I mean, even regarding the value of pre-owned jewelry, I mean, the public is now starting to understand more of the asset value of buying a pre-owned wedding band, and so I would just tell pawnbrokers to be really their bold, courageous self, not to be afraid to be off the wall and do things in their community that might seem different, but because we're really not quirky. We're just very solid citizens who have a lot to digest. And in a very practical sense, if there's anybody who wants any thoughts about online selling, not that we're the best, obviously, but we run a real good website. I'm happy to talk to people on the phone about that. One of the things my team just said they wanted to do this year, which is really cool, is say a pawnbroker wants to put something on our website, they just have to send us some high quality pictures and appraisal info and the price they want, and we'll do that. Awesome. And we can talk about, hey, can we keep 5 or 10% of the sale? But basically, it'll amount to some exposure out there. So we're happy to kind of give that a shot and see how that serves us and other shops around the country who may not have websites.
Love it. Love it, Roger. Thank you so much for being on the show. For those of you who are listening, don't forget to join us in the Pawn Leaders podcast community on Facebook, and stay tuned for the next episode. And I'm back. I am back